In an apartment, Joe is awakened by his AI assistant Mel and reminds him of his schedule for the day, including a meeting with a woman named Ash. Joe recalls how he met Ash in the bookstore he owns in the city, where Ash was curious about a book, and Ash invited him for coffee where they discussed the book, and Joe explained its content, referring about a final purpose. Joe leaves and talks to his friend Oliver, who manages a newsstand. Then he heads to a cafe to meet Ash, who is now his girlfriend. He mentions that he still doesn't know what she does for work, but Ash dodges the question and instead admits she has something important to tell him. At the same time, a man named Hunter is bumped by another man, and he immediately gets angry and knocks the man down. Meanwhile, Ash tells Joe that she loves him, but he is unable to respond. Ash begins to say she isn't from here, but before she can explain, Hunter arrives and shoots her in the head. Joe tries running after Hunter, but he mysteriously disappears into an alley. For the next 2 weeks, Joe is so depressed that he cancels all his plans and never leaves his apartment. Oliver repeatedly tries to visit, and eventually Joe lets him in. Oliver brings coffee, but Joe says he can't taste it and drops the cup. When Oliver tries to offer some comforting words, Joe shuts him down, and Oliver decides to leave. Later that night, Joe goes out and buys a gun and some bullets. He loads the gun and attempts to end his life, but when he pulls the trigger, nothing happens. Joe tries several more times, but it still doesn't work, so he tests the gun by firing at the sofa. This time, the gun fires, but when he tries to turn it on himself again, it still won't fire. Then, he walks over and shoots the window, attempting to jump, but when he hears Ash's voice calling his name, he trips and falls outside. But Joe doesn't fall, and instead he floats in the air, surrounded by all the glass shards. Suddenly, he wakes up in his bed and is greeted by Mel, who informs him of a new message from Ash. He immediately checks the sofa and the gun, but everything that happens seems like just a dream. Joe goes out, and as he walks down the street, he sees a woman with a strange effect on her face. His phone keeps receiving messages from Ash, which should be impossible. So he visits Oliver to ask for advice, but Oliver thinks these may be pre-recorded messages Ash prepared in case something happened to her. So Joe decides to open them. A video of Ash plays, explaining that if he's seeing this, something has happened to her. She needs him to go to his bookstore, pick up a special order under his name, and bring it to his apartment. Joe assures her that he will do it. Meanwhile, in a computer room, 3 people have been monitoring Joe for quite some time. At the same time, Joe arrives at his bookstore, and his assistant Maxine hands him the special order, which is a small book. Joe finds a note on the first page, and as he reads it, something strange happens, but it only lasts a few seconds. So he leaves, unaware that a man is following him. It is revealed that he is one of the people in the computer room, existing at the same time as a duplicate, and is there to retrieve the book and eliminate Joe if necessary. He requests backup, and the other arrives. They begin following Joe until one of them enters the elevator with him, pretending to be a tenant. Joe realizes the man is following him and senses danger. He rushes to his place and tries to close the door, but the man blocks it with his foot and opens fire. Mel tries to contact the authorities, but she appears to be offline. Then Joe runs to get his gun from the table and shoots, but misses. The guy gets ready to attack. However, Joe's body suddenly moves against his will and shoots the stranger with perfect accuracy. Joe hears someone in the corridor and carefully approaches the door. The other man appears, and Joe quickly disarms him, and a fight ensues. The guy makes Joe drop his gun and easily overpowers him until suddenly, Joe begins dodging at an impressive speed, allowing him to knock the man down with just a few moves. The man immediately asks for help and starts beating Joe with the same speed. Joe throws him onto a table, and when the enemy tries to retaliate, he smashes his face against the wall. The man says he doesn't understand, but Joe knocks him out with a punch. Afterward, Joe returns to his apartment and sees Ash on the screen, but it isn't a message. It's a live feed. At the same time, the body inside his apartment suddenly disappears. Ash explains that she didn't mean to leave. She just had trouble hacking into the system, and time works differently where she lives. Joe becomes confused, so Ash explains everything. Many years ago, technology began advancing at an astonishing rate. Artificial intelligence emerged along with advanced behavioral modeling and ultra-realistic rendering. This progress was largely driven by the gaming industry, but it soon caught the attention of intelligence agencies. Hunter, a brilliant software engineer, was hired by Centech, one of the leading firms. He gathered vast amounts of real-world data and fed it into a machine to analyze process control. However, he also had a private project on the side. His goal was to merge all this data to create a virtualized, living reality fueled by a constant stream of information. Hunter couldn't do this alone, and one day he received a message from another coder offering help. They agreed to collaborate and created the first DU, Digital Universe, a fully realized simulated population. The only thing missing was real people with their own emotions and agency. Hunter began using his DU to conduct tests ranging from high-risk surgical implants to advanced weaponry. As his influence grew, Hunter became the CEO of Centec, and progress accelerated. He offered his DU for all kinds of experiments without consequences, claiming that simulated people were cheaper than real ones. For an entire decade, Hunter continued his experiments, creating 497 versions of the DU. This realization makes Joe understand that he's nothing more than a virtual being. However, Ash reassures him, calling him a real man whom she loves. Ash is a real and living in the real world, working for an intelligence agency, and Hunter only killed her model within the DU. She continues to share Hunter's story, explaining that all his experiments were unethical, which led the government to eventually outlaw the modeling technology. However, instead of destroying it, Hunter hid it within the DU. The day he shot Ash, he vanished, using his admin permissions. But defying the laws of physics can corrupt the DU and cause glitches, making the world feel less real. All this time, Ash has been trying to locate Hunter's hidden technology, and during her mission, she met Joe and fell in love with him. The book she sent him contains another layer of data that they need to extract soon. As Joe examines the pictures Ash used during her story, he realizes that the other programmer is his friend Oliver. In real life, however, Oliver hasn't been seen in years. Ash wants Joe to contact Oliver and ask for his help, as she can't access the DU anymore. Joe then realizes that it wasn't Ash who had been helping him. Meanwhile, one of the operator in the computer room named Erica visits Hunter. She explains that hunting Joe is causing too many problems that her team can't patch quickly enough. The only way to ensure no one can access the DU again would be to isolate it from the global networks. But Hunter refuses because it doesn't work as effectively. When Erica insists, Hunter gets angry and tells Erica that he is doing the world and its people a favor by saving them from destroying the real world, because he believes that he is the only one who has the power to stop it from happening using the DU. Erica warns him that they will kill billions of people, but Hunter refuses to listen. As Erica prepares to leave, Hunter asks her to put his globe back and find Ash in the real world. Meanwhile, Oliver contacts Ash, but he only has 30 seconds to talk. She asks for his help in shutting down the DU and assisting with Joe. Oliver promises to stay in contact and quickly hangs up. At that moment, her alarm rings and armed men infiltrate her apartment wearing strange masks. Ash manages to sneak out of her apartment and avoid the drone monitoring the streets. Ash tracks Oliver's call and after some time finds his home. She shares details about her experience in the DU, telling him that she has accepted the programs as being almost like real people. She believes the programs shouldn't be experimented on, but they also don't deserve to be shut down. Oliver doesn't explain why he's been living in the DU, but he admits he was the one who helped Joe. Realizing that Ash truly loves Joe, he agrees to assist her and tells her about an old building where she can hide for the time being. Soon, Oliver gives Ash the means to return, and she is reunited with Joe. Meanwhile, Hunter notices the sudden change in the code on his computer, and suspects that it might be Oliver. Now aware that he isn't real, Joe isn't sure how to react to Ash, but she reassures him that he is real and kisses him. As they discuss how to save him, Ash is suddenly pulled out of the DU and reappears in her room. Oliver explains that he had to do this because Hunter is onto them, and Ash needs to escape. She leaves the room and indeed a masked man begins to follow her. Meanwhile, Joe finds Oliver and pleads for help. Oliver explains that Ash is in serious trouble and suggests that Hunter might shut down this digital universe soon. With all the glitches, Hunter might decide it's easier to scrap this version and build a new one. If that happens, Joe and everyone he knows here will cease to exist. But Oliver has a plan. Joe needs to release the data his model has been carrying. Years ago, developers sometimes left things hidden in the code, and Oliver reveals he did the same in this universe. The book that Ash sent to Joe contains a backup of the entire digital universe. That's the data Ash has been trying to extract. Oliver hands Joe a key and instructs him to upload all the data, go home, and wait for a message with the next steps. Joe accepts the mission, but first stops by his apartment to grab his gun and thanks Mel for the last time. Meanwhile, in the real world, Ash is on the run from the masked man, who has started shooting at her. She manages to hide behind a dumpster until the man is close enough for her to knock the gun out of his hand. A fight ensues, and she breaks his mask and lands a few solid punches, bringing him down. Grabbing his gun, she strikes him with it, demanding information about the DU. When he refuses to answer, she hits him once more and walks away. Unfortunately, as soon as she steps out of the alley, another one knocks her out. When Ash wakes up, she's tied to a chair in Hunter's office. She accuses him of unethical practices, but he counters, saying that she actually enjoys being inside DU, referring to Joe. Afterward, Hunter enters the DU to confront Oliver, who admits he worked with Hunter, not realizing his true intentions until it was too late. Oliver calls Hunter a psychopath, but assures him he'll stay out of his way. Hunter pretends to believe him until his men locate Oliver in the real world, where they kill him. Meanwhile, Joe receives a message from Oliver informing him that he's on his own now. Joe enters an old apartment and finds a computer containing all the data. He places his hand on the control panel, instantly transmitting the information. This triggers an alert to Erica, who orders her men to stop him. Moments later, two men appear outside the window as Joe uses the key on the screen, revealing a cabinet full of guns. When the men enter, Joe swiftly takes them down with perfect shots. Suddenly, Joe hears Hunter's voice and vanishes, reappearing at the harbor outside the city. Hunter is already there and shoots Joe in the shoulder before threatening to finish him off, pointing out that he made him and there is only one Joe and that he can end him whenever he wants. Hunter then uses his control panel to disarm Joe and make him float, beginning to torture him. Hunter mentions Ash, and Joe, enraged, screams with fury, suddenly breaking free from Hunter's control. Hunter, confused, watches as Joe lowers himself to the ground, retrieves his gun, and shoots Hunter. Furious, Hunter decides that it's time for a reboot and the complete deletion of Joe and his DU. Ash pleads with him to at least let her say goodbye, and Hunter, amused by the fact that she's truly in love with a virtual man, agrees. As Joe watches the world around him slowly disintegrate, he is able to share his final words with Ash. His body begins to deteriorate as well, and he tells Ash that he loves her, assuring her that even though he's programmed, his feelings are real. Then, his phone vanishes, and the ground, along with the buildings, disintegrates. Once the computer confirms that the deletion is complete, Hunter orders his guard to kill Ash. The moment is interrupted by Oliver's voice calling Hunter out, just before the orb on the desk begins to shake, and suddenly, it starts floating and disappears. Oliver then appears on the screen, and Hunter is confused because his men were supposed to have killed the real him. Oliver explains that he hid different levels of universes within the digital universe. Suddenly, a figure begins to form, revealing that Oliver has sent Joe into the real world. A gun appears in his hand and he immediately makes the guard drop his weapon. Joe then turns toward Hunter, prompting the guard to grab his gun again, only for his body to start glitching. Erica takes the opportunity to beat him unconscious, then announces that she's finished with Hunter's evil plans and releases Ash. Joe shoots Hunter multiple times, causing him to fall through the window. Joe and Ash reunite, but neither of them understands how it's possible for Joe to exist in the real world. Sometime later, Joe and Ash meet Oliver, who explains that the universe has infinite levels and points out that flesh and blood are no different from code. He explains that all he had to do was copy Joe's code and transfers it into Ash's level. He also points out that while Hunter has the skills and knowledge, he lacks empathy, which is why he fails to understand what he has created. Oliver sees the empathy within Joe and Ash, and that's why he admires them both and saves them. He advises them to enjoy the world they're in because it doesn't matter whether it is real or not, as long as they love that world. Later, Oliver returns to his house, takes a drink, and concludes that this digital universe is finally perfect before disappearing. See you in our next film, Flash. Thank you for watching.